Thank you everyone for coming today. Just a little disclaimer before I get going into the presentation, but due to the nature of the organisation I work for, I'm not allowed to be seen as validating certain vendor products. So we can talk offline if you want to know deep about the actual vendor products that we use and how we consume them, but hopefully there's enough information in this presentation for you guys to use it as a bit of a cookbook or a run book on, to some extent I would say, a successful virtual desktop deployment. So you can take the presentation and hopefully it gives you a lot of different topics to consider. And if you already do all of them, then I'm sure you're going to be delivering a good solution. There may be some things that you don't do and you might not need to do, but due to the nature of my organisation, there are a lot of things that we had to do that were specific to the nature of our business. So you also have to excuse me, I got a little bit of the flu last night, which was not very welcome. It's the flu. Yeah. Anyway, so if I stop for a while, it'll be due to the flu. When I ran this session on Monday, I talked about that you could have questions at the end of the presentation, but I think it made sense for people to ask questions while we're on a topic. So if you do want to ask a question, stick your hand up and hopefully everyone can hear. If not, there's microphones there that probably are turned on, but I'll try and recite the question so others can hear. If I am going to cover the question or the answer for the question as part of the presentation, I might delay it so it flows a bit better. So anyway, thanks for attending. So just a summary of what I'm going to talk about today. It's just basically an overview of the project, the requirements, what was set upon me before I embarked upon this project. Spend a fair bit of time on some of the design and considerations that we had to consider. And then we hit the best practices, the lessons learned, these types of things. And then I previously presented this slide in ANZ last year, but I now talk about the next steps for us. So that may be of interest to you. Some of you might be trying to deliver some of the features that I'm going to embark upon in the next 12 or 18 months as part of your virtual desktop solution if you're about to embark upon it. So we'll see how we go. So who's ASIC? I won't delve too much into this, but if you're from the States, you might be familiar with the SEC. We're the Australian corporate regulator. We look after all companies. We have a lot of lawyers work for our organisation. We're really trying to prevent senior executives committing fraud and taking millions of dollars away from a corporation into their own bank accounts. The company goes broke. We're then sent in to collect all of their data and find out where the money is and go sue them. So that's one of the elements of our business, but other than that, we're there to look out for the investor or the average Australian who might look at the spending money on the stock markets and or investing in a corporation. We've got about 2,300 staff spread across 13 sites. In those 13 sites, some sites are fully remote, or what I call tail sites. We have local infrastructure in about 6 of those. The reason being, we're on a path to centralise, but in Australia, bandwidth is very expensive. So it makes sense for virtual desktops to deliver applications and put the desktops right next to where those applications are being delivered from. But we will eventually get to probably a 2 data centres and have 12 tail sites, give or take. You may also note I talk about virtualising 3,000 desktops, yet we've got 2,300 staff. So similar to the way server virtualisation has an enemy called Sprawl, it happens just as much in virtual desktop world. So if you're going to embark upon a project and you think you need 500 licenses, you might end up with 1,000 desktops. It's just the nature of once people realise how quickly it takes to get a desktop and get access to it, the sprawl just occurs. So we've got about 3,000, probably moving towards 3,100 desktops. The CIO talked to me and originally said, you need to reduce costs. And when we embarked upon this in December 2008, most people will probably be aware that VDI was not as cheap as physical desktops. So we put together some numbers and worked the numbers and came out with about a 5-year return on investment. However, since doing the project, that's probably come down probably about 3.5 years, and maybe by the time we finish this end of calendar year, we'll probably be about return on investment a lot sooner than we expected. So we didn't realise those benefits up until we started consuming, and then we seem to keep getting better and better, and the finance story gets better. So the platform needs to be flexible and manage bursts of activity. As I mentioned, we go out and sue organisations when things go bad. So I was given requirements that said on Friday, or it's Friday afternoon, starting Monday, we've got 60 lawyers starting. They've got to be able to work from day one. They're expensive resources. So the virtual desktop solution really helped us to deliver on that promise. Staff log in from anywhere across the country. They go to any of our 13 sites. They resume their desktop from where they left the office, travel down to a different location, log back in. The apps are still there on the screen. It seems like an easy thing to do, but this solution really allowed us to do that. The old physical platform didn't cater for that. Previously, the organisation did not have application packaging. It was all sneakernet. Don't know if you guys have seen that, but that was a bit of a fright for me, and one of the things that we had to fix, we had to resolve that. There's no more CD-ROMs at the desks, so we got a good handle on that and used thin apps where possible. Level 2 staff needed to be able to manage this environment. I couldn't go out as part of the cost model and hire 10 expert VMware guys. It just wasn't going to work. So I had to retrain staff that didn't understand virtualization in the first place, let alone virtual desktops or server-based computing concepts. So that was an area we spent significant time in, and I'm happy to say that now most of this environment is managed, at least provisioning of users and support is all done by level 2 staff, so we kept our costs down. The complexity of desk moves in the past was a real pain. We've moved a significant number of people amongst new offices, and those moves now are a lot cheaper for us, and that's one of the big drivers, I think, where we've reduced our ROI or increased the ROI. Security of the desktop's critical. We have different security tiers that we must look after, and certain applications can't touch certain zones or security zones, so we build up multiple desktops for certain requirements. And I was also told deploy Office, new version of Lotus Notes, and a document management system as part of this platform, which seemed like average basic things to do, but they were the ones that, when Office screwed up, it was basically an old XP template. The virtual desktop solution was the fault, not the Office rollout. So my advice to you is be warned that senior management can come to you because they see the solution as a whole, as opposed to, for me, I said my patch is fine. The virtual desktops are up, they're humming, no performance issues. Well, people can't print a document, or they can't create a template, or whatever the case may be. Similar with Lotus Notes. Notes issues became virtual desktop issues. You may have all seen that service desk ticket that comes in and says, my internet is broken. Similar thing. So I got the blame for every other issue. I don't think there's a way that you can avoid that, but just be aware of it. So to make the solution as a whole come together, you've got to then focus on the Office team, get those issues resolved, and all the new apps that are delivered through the upgrade. Just be aware that you'll get the blame, potentially. The results, so by about October, 10 months later, we had successfully delivered 3,000 desktops. Within about 6 months, we'd only been given 2 months from the start of the project to deliver a pilot group. I said, that's not enough. No way. Especially when the login script still referred to a Banyan Vines migration that occurred 10 years ago. There was a if-then script that looked at changing the daylight savings for the Melbourne Commonwealth Games in 2001 or whatever it was. It's like, geez, how am I going to do this? So it was quite tight time frames. We did as much as we could and put out the desktop in the best possible fashion we could. Other projects were driving us to hit a date that was non-negotiable. So there was a lot of pressure and focus that this platform deliver on the new applications that were going to be put over the top. We ended up with 92% of virtual desktops. The other 8% is travelers, thick laptop users. I use the term thick laptop. It's a traditional laptop where data is stored locally, but we have a single device policy, so everyone else got a virtual desktop. We removed the old asset, gave them a thin client, and they could not roll back. So we were really pushing the solution and believed that it could deliver it. So it was quite a challenge, and I think we were not necessarily the first virtual desktop rollout across an enterprise, but to hit that many staff, we ran into some roadblocks. Sorry? With the old desktops, we repurposed them, basically pulled the hard disks out. The question was, what do we do with the old desktops, the old assets? Basically, we just threw away the hard disks, put them through a shredder due to the security of the organisation, and then gave them to a schools program. Okay. So we did the packaging. We do a ThinApp first policy. ThinApp wasn't originally part of the solution that we were looking at, but as soon as we identified no packaging processes in place, it was the best tool for the job because we could easily get people to learn how to ThinApp packages and then get them out to the desktops. Teaching people to do traditional install shield is quite a skill. So the ThinApp first policy worked for us. Things that we couldn't ThinApp or weren't able to be app virtualized, we then used the traditional install shield. And the level 2 staff that were going to the office desktops were retrained to become app packages. So they thought they were going to be out of a job because there was no more walk into a desktop to install an app. So we trained them up and they're all now app packages. Yep. So the question's about why wouldn't we repurpose the PCs? So PCs still have a significant power factor. And we really wanted to get down to the low voltage power devices. And we had the funding to do the thin clients. We didn't really, at this time, 2 years ago, there wasn't a great solution to repurpose desktops. There are a lot out there now. But at that time, it seemed to be a little bit risky. But it can be done. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, we didn't want to have to manage all these old assets. The old assets also had a lot of spinning disks. They've been sitting on the desk for 5 years. You open them up, they're full of dust. The thin clients are just a dream. We have at least 10 in every spare site that if one breaks, they just go out, pull the other one out of a cupboard. We don't need expertise. Imaging and management were quite simple. We modified the desktop to suit virtualization. Definitely one of the hot tips, and it's old hat, but a lot of people used to do the P2V of their old physical desktop and put it into the virtual system. Don't do that. Just don't do it. Start with the SOE, build it from scratch, and go out and read plenty of blog posts on how to optimize Windows 7 and Windows XP. Some of them I helped with. There's a company in the Netherlands that were having very similar problems. They were a consulting organisation having very similar issues to me and finding high writes on VDI. And so we kind of worked together to give out each other best practices. around what was working, what was helping to reduce the read-write ratio. But go out and check out, I think it's pqr.nl. Those guys are written a lot of documents about optimizing XP and Windows 7. Question up the back. Sorry? Yeah, Windows 10 PC, I have looked at it. We wanted to get away from managing another Windows OS. So don't get me wrong, they work well, but we went down the thin client, almost like a zero client type solution, and that's been a significant saving in operational effort for us. Sure. Sorry, what are you... The question's around optimization of the desktop. So we're Windows XP only today. Yeah. But we know that if we go Windows 7, we're going to have to do the same amount of effort to optimize that desktop. RDP. PCI-IP was not released 2 years ago. It is now, and there's a lot of work being put into it. Our thin clients don't support PCI-IP. We're still running RDP. And it works for us. Yep. Windows 7 was quite early days 2 years ago. It's on our roadmap, but at the time there was enough risk in doing what we did. I didn't want to chew off on another OS, and that was the right decision at the time. Yep, sure. Yeah, we manage them as assets. They're thin clients that we bought, yep. So we delivered the applications, the core applications which were requested. So some challenges there. Again, I mentioned the tight timeframes to deliver this project. If you get the opportunity, use my slides, and you can say, I suggested don't do it in 2 months. It can be done, but really what we ran into was we delivered a sort of a 1.0 SOE. Over the next 12 months, we ended up delivering like a 1.7. So we did dot releases almost every month of lessons learned and things we'd optimized, and we updated them to the SOE. I would have liked to have launched with 1.7 as opposed to 1.0. But again, that decision was out of my hands, and we had management approval to just get it done. I think I mentioned most of those things before. The I/O workloads, so the IOPS on VDI, this was a surprise to, I think, a lot of people a couple of years ago that were starting out, and to some extent still is. Read-write ratios on your SAN. Originally, the documents I was reading said cater, and the SAN vendor that we were dealing with, cater for 20% write, 80% read. Other way around. That was a surprise. We hadn't scoped the SAN to cater for that, which was upsetting because, we were an early adopter. We wanted to make this a go, so we had to go and spend some more money, buy some more spindles. We now manage that issue, and we know what it's about, but it's one of those problems you don't want to have happen when you're about a month away from deploying en masse. So definitely be well aware of the read-write ratio on the SAN. But there are many SAN vendor techniques now released that I think help in those areas. 2 years ago, there wasn't much. Yeah. When we first identified it, the read-write ratio was about 90% write, 10% read. We've got it down to about 80-20 now, which is still not great. Our base idle setting is about 3,000 IOs running on the SAN. That's with desktops with no one logged into. They're just booting up, sitting there at the Control-Alt-Delete screen, which is quite amazing. But right, Windows is a heavy beast. The other thing is we worked out that we traced the issues and the spikes of I/O back to processes to work out what apps they were. Could we tune those apps? Could we not tune those apps? An example is the antivirus vendor we've got. We've got a very old version of the desktop agent. When one write occurs, it writes 3 times. I don't know why. it should really only be reading, in my mind, and comparing against its heuristics, but for whatever reason, it generates 3 writes. So it's quite inefficient. These things, again, you guys doing it now or over the last 12 months, a lot of vendors are looking at addressing that. We want to move to an agentless antivirus solution, but we're quite security conscious, so we need to make sure that works. That's a question. No, we weren't using link clones. We've got full, fat, persistent desktops. Again, 2 years ago, link clones were released in the version that we rolled out with, but again, it was going to add risk to this project. If I have my time again now, and we're delivering a VDI DR pool, that's all stateless, and we run that in non-persistent mode, and we use link clones. So, yep.
Were your users using any communication or collaboration software, such as video or audio, OCS?
Luckily not. If they were, we would have had a lot more issues. So that was one of my concerns when I first started on the project. We don't do video to the desktop. We weren't doing audio, VoIP, or any of those things in the virtual desktop. We're still not today. It's on our roadmap of things to look at, but luckily it wasn't a requirement that I had to meet. We do run same time, which is part of Lotus Notes, and it's a little bit collaborative, but I don't think it's as heavy as, like, say, a Microsoft OCS or something like that, which is quite difficult to virtualize or run in like a server-based computing environment. Any infrastructure failure that occurs, guess who gets the blame? Desktop guy. We had things happen. Blades fail occasionally. God forbid, the SAN failed a few times for us. It's a difficult meeting to have when your CIO requests you to come to her office and says, right, I've got 400 users in Melbourne twiddling their thumbs, not doing anything. This is your solution. What are you going to do about it? So virtualization, I think, exposes weaknesses in technology and support and designs. But desktop virtualization, again, can exacerbate that issue. So you really want to make sure that you can put your name on it and you're happy with it. Bugs occur. That's the nature of IT. Nothing's perfect. But luckily, the senior managers at where I worked could see the benefits of this solution. Even though there was an outage and there was many, they still saw the benefits. So probably in the last 12 months, we haven't had any major outages that took out an entire site for any number of hours. We've had the odd HA event with a blade just dropping out and these types of things, but that's an issue of that affects 40 users as opposed to 400. So I'm not saying don't do virtual desktops, but just be aware that when you really load this thing up, you want to make sure that you've tested it more than what you think it's going to run at. I'm quite conservative in this project because we have peaks that occur. I wanted to be able to allow the peaks to go. If you're starting at 100% of the capabilities of your infrastructure, this thing is going to get popular once people start to consume it. So you want to make sure that you can grow with it. So definitely do a lot of testing if you can. So some of the drivers, I won't delve into too much of these, but the green IT one was a good one. We communicated back to our users and said, this is good for the environment. Here's the real dollar figures that we're going to save the organisation by doing this. And that helped to market the project, give people a sense of what the government organisation was trying to achieve. So these things are all quite important, I think. Technical guys don't tend to focus on communication with users. We want to sit in our corner and do our stuff, but we had a person in the team that was basically dedicated to communicating with our users, and that was a huge success. Especially when we had the odd outage here and there, they were able to put a positive spin on the solution as a whole, stick little posters on the elevators and toilet doors, and let them know that we're really trying to be progressive for the organisation. We haven't deployed to many types of thin client yet, but we know that the solution, as VMware have released the iPad and Android clients, we'll be able to adopt to those quite quickly. So that'd be very difficult to do if we still had the physical desktop. Sure. Yep. We're about to do the Windows 7 stuff, but knowing that Windows 7 was coming, inevitable. I mean, Vista was there, right? But who's doing Vista, really? So we knew it was there. So what I did was I looked at it and said, we know that Windows 7 is coming. How are we going to be able to remove that OS layer and put the next OS layer in? So we really bought into that layering approach of being able to virtualize the applications. Those applications can be relatively transformed to Windows 7 with ease. So a Windows 7 deployment is big enough for an organization of this size, but I think we've almost put in some frameworks in the virtual desktop solution will allow us to rip and replace that a little bit more easily than doing it all from scratch. If you're doing Windows 7 and virtual desktops and app virtualization, that's a big project. But we've already done the other pieces. We've just got to do the OS piece. So, sure.
Yeah, you said you have self-service apps, or all the apps written down by the user, you guys will deliver, how do you entitle those apps?
So the question's around self-service apps. So I came from a large organization that had a really good self-service portal. I love the idea of just going to a website, doing the old app store kind of thing, picking the app, getting it deployed, happy days. We didn't deliver that as part of this project, but I delivered the infrastructure or the capability to overlay that type of application in the future. So all our apps belong to an ACL group in Active Directory. The user gets added to the group. When they log in, that app is deployed. And we do a thin reg, so for thin app, it's not even an install or an MSI, it just registers the app. And if you look on the VMware website, there's some VB scripts that help you do that. So we're not there yet to allow the user self-service app store, but we're pretty close. We've built that kind of framework to allow us to overlay that software whenever we pick and choose what that may be. Sorry. We in our base SOE, we install Office and Lotus Notes, and what I would classify as Tier 1 apps are all in that base SOE. Yeah, as MSIs, yeah. The Tier 2 apps, so things like Project and Visio, they're all Tier 2, and they stream down from an app from a file share. That works well. So prepare for success. These are the sort of design points that you need to consider. Make sure you do a proof of concept and a pilot. A lot of people don't like that you've got to do these stages, but we really took the lessons learned out of that environment. We made sure users on the proof of concept stayed on it. We removed the asset. We kept them working there. We wanted to gather the feedback on how this was going and how it was performing. In the background, we were doing a lot of statistics and analysis on how many users we'd be getting per blade or per server, how many IOs were being written, read, all that kind of stuff, so we could work out how much it was going to actually cost us to deliver these solutions. The user feedback, the surveys, is it good, is it the same, or is it worse? Normally the surveys have got 5 options, and I think when you read those surveys, you really don't get a good handle on what the response is. This one, I've got 2 out of 3 chances for it to be a successful or a positive outcome. If it's as good, that's okay. The users weren't complaining before. So 2 out of 3 options for the project to be deemed a success in the early phases was good. Speak to the IT teams, speak to the business, gather their requirements, and then try and make sure you deliver those requirements in the solution. People that were on the proof of concept said, we love this. We're not going back to a physical. I was like, oh no, I need to get that infrastructure back so I can use it for another project. So we ended up buying a few more servers, but we left the people that love this on the virtual desktops, and then we called them ambassadors. We got them to speak to other people in the business. It was a lot better than IT preaching to the business saying, this is what you need, this is what you want. Other business guys walk around saying, this is cool. It's a bit of a trick though. The old PCs had 256 meg of RAM. The virtual desktops had 2 gig. These guys are doing analytics and big spreadsheets and all this kind of stuff. That's the solution that we delivered to all our desktops. Everyone's got 2 gig, and if they need more, they get 4. I never wanted memory to be a limiting factor of the solution. Apps want memory. They run better when they're in memory rather than swapping or paging. So do plan for giving your users a lot of memory where possible. So we went through, did all the workshops, collected all the details, created some service catalogs, chargeback models, got all the user surveys, and then the top 10 talkers. Top 10 talkers is a concept that I learned at another organisation. These are the top 10 help desk issues that can't be fixed in the current system. So we fixed them in the virtual desktop solution. As soon as people logged into the virtual desktops, you know they were there trying these old little bugs that just could never be fixed. Boom, they're all fixed. You get a lot of thumbs up from new users. They're positive about the change that's going on. So that was a good win for us. Green IT. This is just a brief slide to talk about some of the savings that you can make in regards to power. So not many people do a 10-hour day in a government agency, but I average it out and figure that the odd user does do a few more hours than they should. But roughly with that calculation, the time we work per week is only 30% of a week. So there's 70%. If you can power down the devices, you save some money. And in fact, a significant amount of money can be saved in our power bill in Australia. Power is going through the roof. My power bill's gone up $300 a quarter. It's ridiculous. But we got a real dollar figure from our power company, handed that back to the users and said, if you just shut down the Wise client, there we go, Wise, when you leave the office, that'll save us, 50 grand a year. People equate that to real money, It doesn't seem like a lot of money, but it's a significant saving.
How is it negated by your extra infrastructure for the data center to support which never gets shut down?
Yeah, well, DPM, no, not using it yet, but I am heavily testing it every so often, but it doesn't do what I want it to do yet. We've written a lot of PowerShell scripts to power on things, power them off, but we need to be confident when we start a business day that all our devices are on. I think, what was your question again?
How did the extra data center?
Yeah, so the offset of the data center was an increase in power consumption, but yet 3,000 PCs, their power consumption versus, give or take, about 80 to 100 blades is significantly less. So that was a V specialist down the front here actually claiming a true wattage amount. But essentially there's a saving over the course of an entire organisation. So keep that in mind and sell that back to your users. Question? Yep. So the question's about, do we run login scripts to not get a boot storm? Essentially we have power policies set on our pools and we power them down when they're not in use, or if I found that the view broker is not as fast to shut down desktops that are not in use as I'd like. So we run PowerShell scripts to then shut down those desktops of a Friday evening at about 10 p.m. because we know not a lot of users are going to log in over the weekend. If a user does need to log in on the weekend, the view system will allow that machine to power on. Of a Monday morning, we run scripts that kick off at about 4 a.m. and we make sure all desktops are online prior to users coming into the office. We try and avoid the boot storm issue. It's not a nice one to have, so we sort of skirt around the problem and the users don't see that delay. Question? I can talk a little about it. It's a good question. It's about what hardware do we use. So we use 2 CPU, 4-core, older non-Nahalims for most of our VDI environment. Nahalims weren't available at the time that we bought. Each of those blades is 64 gig of RAM. We get approximately between 40 and 50 desktops per blade. That may seem like a low number considering some of the vendor quotes that say you can get 300 or whatever. But when you're giving 2 gig to each user and there's real use, we find that that's about the sweet spot for us. Sure. Yeah, so the question's about, I think, workload and what we found. So across our estate, server virtualization is memory intensive, CPU is not so much. VDI, we find CPU is quite intense. We run at about 80% CPU. Memory is about 50%. And that's with overcommit. So we start with minimum 40 desktops, that's 80 gig of RAM, plus the odd user might have 4 gig of RAM. So we're overcommitting, and I definitely suggest you leverage that. Because if the memory is not actually being used, then across 40 users, they're not all going to consume 100% of memory. You get a lot of efficiencies there. So, yeah, memory is about 50 to 60% in use. So we've still got a lot of memory left. That's why we can easily pull any machine and take it from 2 to 4 gig as required. As in from a view composer? Oh, sorry, just view broker? So early days, yes. Yeah. I won't toot my own horn, but a lot of scalability within the view system is due to a lot of the bugs that were found at my site. And to some extent, my CIO requested graphs from VMware to say, you need to prove to us that this thing scales. When we first rolled out, there were a lot of issues in the JMS issue and a lot of desktops communicating with the brokers. We designed around it to some extent, but then the improvements came in future versions of the broker, and that's... We used to have an issue where users would attempt to log on and they'd say no desktop available. And it's because the JMS queues hadn't got around to communicating with the agents in time. We got sort of a bug fix, and that's been resolved, and we don't have issues of that nature anymore. The question up the back there.
What's the size of your staff to support 3,000 desktops?
Size of the staff to support that? We have... I'll go through the different teams. Service desk, the guys on the phones, there's about rotating 10 of those. Level 2 guys that walk around to desktops, there's about 5, 1 in each major site. Of level 3 nature, so the back-end operations, we have sort of a Wintel team. There's approximately 12 of those guys. And then there's a sort of a virtualization / storage guys, and there's approximately 5 of those. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's a big environment, but we managed to do okay. This question. Networking team is about 5 or 6. Yep. This is a slide on just the SLA side of things. So what you commit to a customer and what you're trying to achieve ends up becoming SLAs that you want to get off each of the respective teams of infrastructure. So it's really a slide to show that there's more behind the virtual desktop than just what the user sees. We don't have strict SLAs between each of the infrastructure teams, but it's what we're working towards. So this is kind of a vision for what we know we need and what we want, but we're getting more mature as we go. So we're talking about design time. I won't go into too much here because I've mentioned many of the things. How does printing work? Traditional Windows desktops do a find printers. It looks for printers in your subnet. Where's the subnet? It's in the data center. Where's the printers? Where the users are. So we wrote a little binary. I think I used a site called VWorker. You can pay someone in India $20 to write you a bit of code. I told them what I wanted. They delivered a little binary that we ran in every desktop, and essentially it just redirected the IP address of the thin client and basically duplicated it into that find printers dialog box. So people were searching for the printers on the subnet their thin client device was in. This has now been resolved, I think, in a lot of the way VMware are doing printing within View as a product. 2 years ago, it didn't work. Okay, so that was an interesting hurdle to cross, but it's suited us nicely. There's 3 different time zones in Australia, so we deal with time zone complexity, and users wanting to remain in a time zone. How do you update the time zone when they move around the country, this type of thing. We built a HTA script that allows people to pin the time zone to whatever time zone they want to be in. Sometimes the thin client device will own that for them, and that's the default. However, some people just want to keep themselves on Perth time if they travel to Sydney. And PCOAS, that's PC on a stick. This is a remote access solution that we delivered to cut down the cost and number of physical laptops that we were giving out. We went from about 300 laptops to approximately 100. There was a good cost saving in that, but also the minimization on security and data loss, even though our laptops are all encrypted. But to log into our environment, we have to be ratified against certain security standards. So we built this PC on a stick, which is essentially a VMware workstation ACE image. For those who know the product in ACE, it allows you to burn an image onto a USB stick. It's encrypted, it is non-persistent, and essentially it's just got our VPN client and the View client. We have 600 of those USB sticks given out to our staff for remote access. They go home, they use it with their devices, and it means we don't have to support their device at home, yet we still know they're coming from a trusted image. So significant savings in that, and it's been a very good solution and uptake. I just hope VMware continue to develop that product or wrap it into View. Yeah, question. There's nothing on the stick that has any data on it, apart from a Windows image. It doesn't have much else in it. And it's stateless, so every time you boot it, it goes back to the state that we put on that image. You can't write data to it. You can't attach other devices to it. We just allow printer pass-through, so people can print to their home printers. There's a question up the back.
Do you require backup?
Yes. Yep. So our VPN client kind of hooks into a token. So essentially a lot of people that request remote access, they opt for this solution. They get the USB stick for $50 and a token for another $50. Question over there?
What do you do for profile management? Where do users actually store the data on the desktop?
So the virtual desktops, we used Microsoft's redirection of My Documents, Desktop, and Favorites. Anything else in the profile, I don't care about. If we have to spend more than an hour debugging an issue on a desktop, blow it away, give them a new one. We spent significant time around ensuring that the first time login would ensure that the user can connect to all their apps. So to some extent we are looking at user profiling in the future, but if you can agree or get agreement that what's in a profile shouldn't restrict the user or have any important data in it, you can expire that stuff and not necessarily care. It does make management a lot easier in many ways. Sorry, what was the question? Numbers of my team. So I'm in the technical engineering team, and there's about 6 in my area. And we look after all different technology streams and then delivering solutions and designs for the organisation as a whole. We've kind of got experts in storage, virtualization, desktop, applications, these types of things. Sorry? Only 6 in the tech engineering team, yeah. Field engineers, so our level 2 team, there's about 6 to 8 of those. They're distributed around the country. There's an operations team as well. There are approximately about 12. I won't go into too much here. That's just common project management stuff. I want to get into the big 4 that you need to concentrate on. So spend a lot of time working on the network. We looked at WAN scalers and dedupe sort of solutions across the network, which helped our solution. Again, we're running RDP, so we were able to run it unencrypted and uncompressed. We have hardware encryptors across our WAN, so we still do encrypt, but we were able to leverage WAN acceleration type devices. We did have an issue where some of the routers and switches were connected at 10 meg half duplex. That caused us no end of issue. It took me 4 months to get the network team to actually admit that the issue was theirs. It's very easy to prove, but again, as a solution, people were saying that it's the virtual desktops that's slow, it's this, it's that. We were doing just simple pings between the thin client and the data center, and you get ping, 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 drop, 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 ping, ping, ping. That's a network issue. If I can ping from the virtual desktop to its local gateway and it gets 100% and 1 millisecond response time, there's an issue somewhere. So that took a while to prove to them and get them to take it serious. Storage. I mentioned it, touched on it briefly. You need to spend a fair bit of time on storage. There's a question up the back.
Approximately how much bandwidth are you using per user?
It's a good question. How much bandwidth per user? I haven't looked at the numbers, but I believe I wouldn't want to talk about averages, but the number of about 300K is in order. We dropped down the screen definition to about 16-bit or 15-bit, I think is one of those two. And users that connect and need high-end graphics, they'll get a full 32-bit image. We've started to deploy some PC over IP for users that need to use graphics and these types of things. But because our solution runs RDP, we've got the WAN accelerators, the thin client devices we've got don't support PC over IP. RDP is used, but we get a lot of benefits and it seems to work. The desktop template, I talked a little bit about this. Spend a lot of time optimizing that template and then communicate with your users. You definitely want to do that. Again, it seems like such an obvious thing, but IT guys are traditionally poor at communication. It can help you. So that means communicate to the business, to your senior management, to the teams. A lot of people in IT didn't realize until we were 2 months into the project that this was happening. That was probably my fault, but once we started communicating with them, let them know it was coming, people started to get on board, ask for help. It became a positive thing. So this is just a couple of slides on what we did as part of the rollout. I won't delve into each of these, but concentrate on your storage multipathing, test your platform, pull the cables, pull this one, power it down in the middle of the day, do all that stuff. You want to know the adverse effects of what happens in your infrastructure during some type of event. We had to document the solution to raise change requests, these types of things, training and comms. A lot of IT staff were trained. Then we did the rollout migration I mentioned before. We didn't repurpose the PCs. We distributed them off to a third-party clearinghouse, gave them to some schools. Best practices, turn on all the alerts and thresholds. You want to know what's going on. Is there a disk that's been dropped? Again, one small issue could affect a lot of users. Better to have a good response from the manager and say, yeah, we were just about to go into the data center and replace that. And here's the alert and the email and here's the action trail, as opposed to, oops, 400 people can't do something. It's not a good answer. Give your VM's memory. So again, try and leverage the way vSphere works, allowing you to overcommit your memory. I was a big believer in this, and we've never been hit with any sort of memory type performance issues. The old documents that I read 2.5 years ago around VDI said give every user 500 meg of RAM, and apps just don't work in 500 meg of RAM. We know that as IT guys, but don't enforce it on your users. Try and give them the memory, and you can share it if it's not in use. So the question's around, have we found a good product which I think can look at an entire ecosystem of virtual desktops? Yes, I have. They're out on the show floor. We haven't bought one of those yet. We do use a lot of the VMware tools, but I have recently seen some great tools that monitor from the thin client to the local switch to the data center to the desktop to the apps to the infrastructure, the storage, all of that kind of stuff presented in one dashboard. Awesome. Love them. I'm trying to buy something like that. And if I only had it 2 years ago, I probably could have saved 6 months of pain because I got the finger pointing tool. I had to prove to the network team that these packets were dropping. The tools that are out there today, automatically record when there's an issue and these types of things. So if you have the funding or you're doing these sorts of projects and you're concerned about the risk, go and deploy these applications that monitor from end to end. I can't speak highly enough of them. They're really good. It seems like a simple thing, but antivirus definition updates, schedule them out of hours and randomize them if you don't have a virtualization-aware AV system. That causes, the definition updates causes SCSI reservations and SCSI locks. We talked a little bit before about the hardware we've got. We run 300 gig LUNs. Our XP image is about 15 gig, give or take with a swap file. We end up with just under 20 desktops per LUN. But even with that number, definition updates occurring on 20 machines all at once, those 20 users can be out of action for 10 minutes. Again, it's a simple thing to do. I was well aware of the issue from experiencing it in server-based computing environments, but the antivirus administrators weren't, and they kept forgetting to change the default scan schedules and update schedules. Consider VMsafe, Seraph, and Seraph API appliances. These are kind of the way VMware's moving, that you can start to consider agentless antivirus. I don't know of any vendor that's doing true desktop agent sort of antivirus scanning. They do a lot of IDS, IPS type scans. But when that stuff is out, we will jump on that pretty quick. And I talked about the finger pointing there before at the bottom. Resolve the top 10 talkers, deliver the self-service app portal, calculate the green IT savings, communicate back to the users, look at the benefits of vSphere 4.1 and 5.0. ESX35 didn't have a lot of desktop-specific performance information. It still works quite well, and that's what we're running, but there's a huge leaps and bounds in sort of benefits for desktop virtualization in 4 and 5. So we'll leverage those over the next 12 months. Don't have hundreds of users on a physical server. You can buy some big iron these days, but you don't want 300 phone calls when you have a HA event. That will flood any service desk, and they will be gunning for you. Even though it's only a HA event and potentially the desktops will restart, it's just a difficult problem to deal with. So I like the smaller half-height size blades. I think they're a good fit for VDI. So here's the end result. Many touch points. It turns out if you're the virtual desktop guy looking after this environment, you've got to be an expert in almost all of these. Or you need to become good friends in each of the towers and pillars in your organization. This is complex stuff. Okay. It can be done though, and the benefits, far exceed the complexity in many, many ways. This is the future of our desktop. We'll look at Windows 7 or 8, depending on when 8's released. We'll try and go 64-bit if possible. The self-service app portal, that'll be a definite fit for our organization. Users want to consume apps like the App Store from Apple. They're familiar with it. We'll do some DPM on the ESX host to really, again, get some green IT savings. Link clones and offline desktops will be looked at heavily. And we'll do the vSphere 5 and View 5 upgrade. We're on the beta for those. And I see some good stuff in that for us. The real-time monitoring, the finger-pointing apps, that'll be part of our new desktop. And hopefully agentless antivirus. We're already rolling out a secure printing solution. And that makes printing in virtual desktops a lot simpler. Essentially, the users print to a default queue of black and white, color, or custom. They walk up to any printer in the organization, tap their ID card, and the print job comes out. So it makes it a lot easier to give the users access to the printers in their local neighborhood kind of area. So lastly, the key lessons learned. VM Sprawl. We've got 700 more desktops than we do staff. We've got to manage those. Look at the big 4 things that I mentioned before. Look at that read-write ratio. Don't rush it like I did. You'll have some scars. Finger pointing dashboards will be your best friend. This stuff's complex. The benefits are there, though. They're really, our organisation is now able to accelerate the business in a way that just wasn't possible before. If we had our time again, we would do it again. Even with the 2-month compression of time, this is a sort of not necessarily a strict quote, but the senior managers have told me that, yeah, there was some pain, but we definitely see the benefits. Okay, I'll take these questions here. Yep. Yeah, we have apps that we can't virtualize. We use traditional MSI, install Shield, and deliver those to the desktops. You may also look at like a terminal server solution for that. Yep. Yeah, essentially we've got a VDI pool that people can choose from a drop-down of list of our brokers, and they can connect to the VDI one as an absolute default if they must work. That's on separate infrastructure in a separate data center, but we'll still allow them to connect to those apps. So we've kind of got a fallback which is already there and it's turned on in the background. I'll take that.
How do you estimate the amount of storage you're going to need? Now, you know your engineers are already supposed to be keeping their work documents on their network share.
That's right, yeah.
And they do. They'll just either my documents, my favorites, or my documents to their desktop.
Yep.
So you tell them what? Hey, your desktop's going away, your hard drive's going away, and now you got to make sure you move everything up before we take it away. Now you got 20 terabytes of iron DVDs and iPod music and porn.
Sure. Okay. So for our environment, we ACL heavily. The local C drive, program files is really the only folder they can write to themselves. But we have that concept where the desktop's not backed up. If you put some data there, we're going to blow it away. IT owns that device, and it's bad luck. So you've got to make a hardline stance. You end up having to support this crap that comes in the organisation. But we just have a no. We just don't care. That's bad luck. You're not meant to do it. Our My Documents is redirected to their home drive. So if they do write to those traditional areas, we are saving them for the most part. Yeah, that was lucky. That was one of the group policies that existed. Yeah, we just had a traditional Microsoft redirected profiles, and it's a local profile. Yeah, no. But even if we did, we would have probably created some form of custom script that pushed it to that area and then overlaid the group policy in the virtual desktop environment. Anyway, my contact details are there if you want to ask questions afterwards. Last one.
Jeff, just the ROI tracking, you said there's unexpected ROI features.
Yep.
But also, who was responsible? Jeff makes responsible for tracking ROI.
So there's a question about the ROI and sort of, I guess, the benefits that we've incurred recently. It's not strictly tracked, but we do look at it probably once every year and kind of do an update. We have to report back to other government agencies or essential government figure to kind of say how we're tracking on projects and budgets. So once a year we kind of look at that and get a fair indication of where we're at. But it's no strict one person's job. The unexpected ROI was things like those the moves where we didn't have to pay for people to ensure that asset A was moved from location 1ZA to 1B3. Users could log in from anywhere, do those types of things. The bursts of activity, I've got to create 60 desktops overnight. We can do that. We could not buy 60 desktops previously. I couldn't have 60 staff sitting there for 6 weeks without access to a PC. That is very difficult to equate that cost, but we kind of could average it out based on the staff figures and salary numbers and then work out, well, if they were idle for 6 weeks, which is our procurement time, this is the benefit to the organisation. So you attach that and add that back onto your the other side of the spreadsheet. Yeah, sure. The complexity one, yeah, the fun one. You guys will get a copy of these slides, though. There is a typo here which I only realised last night. On the network I've got antivirus and app inventory. That was just a duplicate from another. You can see it under the management side, but yeah, copy and paste, yeah. Sorry? We pretty much walked in, picked up the asset, replaced it with a thin client, ran a few scripts across their home drives. We were doing other things like implementing DFS shares at the same time. And essentially we had like a batch script written. We knew that 30 users per night were going to be migrated, or 30 to 70, depended on the number of people that were available that night to do the rollout. And essentially we'd just execute a script across their accounts and update them and enable them for the pool, add them to the groups, add them to the thin apps that they require, these types of things. It was quite an intense process, but we managed them in batches of about 30 to 70. And that took about... it was 6 months in total, but we did it in bursts of activity. It was really only about 6 weeks of man hours or man effort every night for 6 weeks. Okay. Thanks, guys.